Hey, this is Mark and Leah from Mandala Studios. Welcome to the workshop. This is part one of making a latex fishy mask.
So we're starting with blocking out the sculpt. We've got one of our head forms there. We're adding a depth of clay, building it up, making it obviously larger than it would be on a normal face because the latex shrinks. Latex
shrinks about 8 to 15%, so we tend to make our masks about 10% bigger than the customer needs them to be.
It's not vital on this one because it's not a full overhead mask, but it's useful practice. It's good to be in the habit of doing it. It is vital with the full overhead masks, especially when they're being made to be close fit to someone's head.
So yeah, just clay cuttering off slabs of clay just to build up an even thickness so we know that symmetry is reasonably good to start with.
So later on you'll be able to see some of the images I'm working from. They're just off to the right hand side. We've got a variety of different images for this one. And we're bringing in components of each of them.
Yeah, the customer gave us 4 different references and said we could make up something that combined elements of all of them.
Yep. So once we've got the basic blocks on, we're starting off putting some forms and some shapes on there to build the head up to the shape the shapes we're after. You can see the eyebrows on there. We've already done the brow ridge, and we've got quite a lot of bulk around the nose to sort of get a structure to hang our barbels off.
You can see the references over to the right, the blue picture. You can even see it's a bit like what we're doing at the minute.
Yep.
Yeah, so now we're just sort of blocking in ideas, getting a vague suggestion of where we want to go with things. Because we've got a free rein to make whatever we want from those images, we're just sort of trying out some ideas at this point as well.
Yeah. But a lot of this point is still... we said we're detailing, but we are still playing with the structure underlying the skeletal structure, the muscle structure, building up and moving things around until it looks cool.
You see we're taking the basic lumps of clay we put on as the blocking out, and now we're just refining it into the surface a bit to get those primary forms developing like they're part of the thing.
So this is using some foam backer rod in order to sort of give the shape of the fin over the top of the head that we're going to be adding, and we'll come back to that one later. So those will go in and out depending on, what point we're at with the sculpting, what we're doing around them, and they just give us an idea of how it's going to look when it's finished. They're not in their final form. And I think it'll be one of the other videos where we show you what we do with those.
That'll be part 3, I think.
Ooh. And you can see there quite clearly on his cheek the structure for the sockets for the barbel, which again will be made out of that same backer rod.
You see here I'm tidying up the back and working out the position of where the overall mask will sit on the head. We're cutting it quite far forwards because we've got separate ears that are going on. So now we've got all the primary forms done, we know pretty much what we're making. So it's now a case of refining all the details, starting to build in all the creases and folds around the nose and mouth, any of the structural elements that form the details over the brow ridges, you can see going in there.
Just adding more of the character, more of the interest there.
So you're building up the jawline a bit, didn't like what it was before.
Yeah. And generally we're beginning to sort of smooth things out a bit as well, so it flows nicely. And there you can see one of the images again, and we have to keep going back to them, keep referring to them to work out how it's going to all sit.
And making sure we've taken the right bits off the right ones to make the combined look the thing that we think the customer will be happy with.
Yep. I mean, we want this one, it's a custom order, it is based on the images sent through by that customer, but it will eventually, they'll have it exclusively for a year, and at that point we will start bringing it into our more general range of masks.
Unless they take them all the way.
Yes, unless they take them all the way.
But most people just leave them all with us and we use them after a year.
Yeah.
Now what I'm doing in the background there looks an awful lot like I'm doing the texture stage, which I am, but I'm actually doing it to work out if that works, the texture. So I'm just like messing around on the sculpt to annoy Leah and to see if what I'm doing will work.
I'm beginning to look at how the
spines
and the fin are going to sit. The ears will also have a similar structure to them. They'll have the spines as well, so it'll have lots of nice sort of fishy fins everywhere. And build the sockets up around them, because while we've put the ridge in through over the top of the head, what we haven't done at the moment is actually create the holes that backer rod will sit in. And obviously for that to work we need to have them in place. I think we tried a whole variety of different angles with them as well at various points.
So now Leah's just really softening all the features off with a wet brush, adding the barbels sockets in and starting to build the sockets properly for those final positions.
I found the angles interesting for the fin over the top, because the front fin is very, very upright, but we needed to get that look of the whole thing sort of sweeping backwards. And I know we changed the height of them later, but I think the angles were pretty set at that point.
So now we're actually doing the texture for real, so I'm talking the surface. This both softens the surface textures you've put in and starts to dry out the surface, so it takes the texture better. I'm just going to alternate between talking and then raking in some directional lines with some wire tools and adding the scale texture with the mesh that you saw me doing earlier to see how it worked. I'm just pushing the mesh into the clay and rubbing it with my fingers. Not too hard to really get any finger impressions, but just embed that mesh fabric into the surface where I want the scales to be, then soften them out with the talc again.
It's worth noting Wookie is throwing around the talc there. If you're using talc like that, you really probably ought to be using mask as well.
Then we're sealing it. Normally we'd use crystal clear, but I couldn't find any crystal clear, so in this case I'm using a can of black acrylic spray paint. It's basically the same as crystal clear, and it's actually quite handy because you can see where it's stuck in the mould at the end if it's not clean enough.
Again, we're using extraction here, so he's in the spray booth. He isn't wearing a mask, but we have really good extractions.
Thanks for watching.
Don't forget to like, share and subscribe.